Hi, good afternoon. This is Evie's. I decided to do this second part of the video outside. I think it's a beautiful day. So, with that being said, this is a continuation of the first video about addressing mental illnesses. But this one, it's more, I will mention a little bit about Mark, and the one that I discuss is specifically Mark chapter 5 that deals with the man in the tomb. But in relation to us today, I'm not going to go over the meanings in exorcism or things like that because I already addressed that in the first video. But with that being said, I was guided to do this video because understanding since COVID, a lot of people have been dealing with extremely severe mental stages where they're like, as I mentioned before, depressed, or their anxiety is completely off the roof, and all of these emotions that they simply cannot cope with it. And respecting the privacy of certain people that I would mention, I would only mention the experience and not the names, or if there's any relation to me with them. Again, respecting their privacy. So what I noticed is in the last video, we were talking about Father Vincent, and Father Vincent was actually mentioning in a specific topic that I thought it was interesting because the book, again, just for those that didn't see it, the book that Father Vince did was published back in 2020, and to me that was crucial because how can we still talk about exorcism in this era? If I mention the three different scenarios that I mentioned in the video prior that Mark talks about, when it's about a specific exorcisms that Jesus did, to me, it's almost as what are we still dealing with that even in 2020 you're still promoting that word exorcism, you're still promoting how do you expose something out of the body, because that's what exorcism means. Exorcism is actually forcing something out of the body. So what is happening in our society as a whole that we still have to do that? But one aspect that he mentioned that I was very compelled to mention too is that he was actually chosen by somebody to do that, not that he wanted to become an exorcist. And according to him, is something that we need to understand, that if for some reason we as people love the fact that the evil spirit, or like things that happen like that, and you just want to follow and whatever, then you just obsessed with it. You need to be careful. You definitely need to be careful with that. And not because I want to put fear in people, but I want you to understand, if you want to spend your life and you really want to seek for that, it's something that tells you what is in your heart, that you find it attractive, that you find it like you want to do that. And he mentions that in his book. He mentions that he's very explicit about that, because he said that in no shape or form he wanted to become an exorcist. It was somebody who was superior, who worked in the area for a very long time, that recognized that he was a good candidate by the simple fact that he wasn't looking to become one. And I think that's the difference. But for me, we have to pay attention to that part, because what it's saying at this point is not that you want to be an exorcist, but what is in your heart that you feel that you still need to find that appealing. Why is that appealing to you? And dealing with emotions, that's very important, because if the emotions are rooted on bad behavior, on bad attitudes, then the outcome is not going to be either good, right? So now that I clarified that, I want to actually mention the word temptation, which I mentioned it in the video before, but I didn't went to more details. And what is a temptation? Temptation is actually the desire to do something especially wrong or unwise. But temptation biblically is almost as you're facing constantly something that you already know is not good for you. And in the spiritual level, they call that temptations. They relate that to evil actions or evil attributes for whatever reason. So temptation is actually biblically is more about the experience a challenge, something that you have not overcome. In Matthew, I believe, gives a description as to how Jesus dealt with temptation. And it's a very long verses. It takes a lot of verses about explaining that part. But the part that I like is that even Jesus faced temptations. So if Jesus was sacred and he was the Son of God, he still dealt with temptation. Then that means that overall humanity, individually, collectively at the same time, will face temptations, because temptations are experiences or challenges that you need to face. The problem with temptation in this society is that, let's just say, for example, you have issues with family members that every time they come around, it's always a fight, it's always an argument, and you have made the decision like, I don't want to deal with them. Well, guess what? If you haven't found the grounds as to why every time they come to your house they're arguing and fighting with you, then the temptation continue, meanings every time they're going to come around your house the same scenario will replay. And that is the problem, because now you don't want to face it because you already know that they're constantly arguing. But have you figured out why they're arguing? Have you figured out why every time they come near you, it triggers something on them that they feel like begin to argue and fight with you? So that will be something that you need to consider. And this is just an example. But the reality is that when we're dealing with situations that are not comfortable for us, we tend to face them and continue to face them and continue to face them. In biblical terminology, it will be called temptation. In a normal situation or in our society, we don't just mention temptations. It's almost like, what the heck? Why do I still continue to deal with this person? Or like, why this is continue to happening to me? Well, very easy. You haven't mastered. That means that you have not go into a position when you are comfortable with that situation and still not be triggered by it. And that's the problem. That will be the key over here. That's one thing that we need to also understand. Now, going into a more deeper person, when the person is actually having more situations that they cannot go out, that can turn into a depression. This is, let's just say, for example, a person who has children, a single mom. The kids have different illnesses, unable to work because of COVID, and having a difficult ex-husband, making your life miserable for you, not even making it better, and all of these things that child's becoming aggressive, unable to control them while they're in school, and that even in school they still extremely aggressive, and all of that. Let's just say, for example, that's what's happening. This person is not realizing what is happening, so in turn the lack of inability to find solutions for the problem on this particular person not only will give you anxiety, but it will give you a severe depression because you just don't know any further. And I have seen and I have experienced times where people become hurtful to themselves, meaning that they contemplate suicide because they have this inability to find solutions for all of the problems, right? So if we look at it in general, well, what do you do? Where do you go? Do you go to a crisis center? Do you actually try to make appointments and see if somebody can help you? Where do you go? What do you do? Um, what I noticed in the past few months is that there is help out there. If you do have suicidal thoughts, I mentioned in two videos prior that the number for the National Suicidal Hotline is to call a 1-800-273-8255. But if you want something within your community, let's just say I wake up today and what do I do when I wake up and it's the same scenario back again? And I just became so dysfunctional in a sense that I cannot even cook, I can't clean, I can't even bathe myself. I don't even want to put makeup. I don't want to get dressed. But then I have also, this is not just about me. I have to take care of my children. I have to take care of my husband. What do I do if they don't even recognize that I'm going on a path of severe depression, right? What do you do? So the first thing is to recognize that from the moment you neglect yourself, and I mean when you stop caring how you feel, how you look, and how you dressed, psychologically, that is a sign that you are getting overwhelmed. Why? Because when you feel good, you want to look good. When you feel, I always believe that part of feeling good is about looking myself in the mirror and feeling good about myself, feeling good. But if you look at yourself in the mirror and you don't feel good, and I don't mean that you gain weight, I don't mean it that way. I mean like you don't feel that that person in the mirror is a reflection of you, because it's so disappointing that you start crying. That's a sign of depression. That's a sign of desperation, and you need to seek for help. Why? Because as a mother, me being a mom, I can't take care of my children if I am unable to first take care of myself. If I fall apart, if I'm unable to get out of bed, if I am sick, who's going to take care of my children? And this is when I was a lot younger. I don't have younger kids now. But when I was young, that was my mentality. So I always knew that I had to take care of myself because I didn't have the luxury of a mom or a dad that can help me take care of my children. And because of it, I always have to be the stronger person. So now, the first thing to do is recognize the signs. When you start lacking that inability to feel better or do things that you're supposed to do normal, that you would do on a normal basis, like cooking, bathing, dressing up, putting makeup, simple stuff like that, check yourself out because something is not okay. So that will be the first thing. The second thing is, where do you go? Well, depending the situation, the first thing to do is sit down and figure it out. What is causing so much trauma in you or drama? Let's just say is you have children that are extremely disrespectful or aggressive. Then you have to figure it out why your children are that way. Do they need a different approach, right? But also, what are you doing that it's making them become aggressive, right? Because sometimes we do have to first check ourselves out and then make decisions for our children. But it's always about you. It's always about look at yourself in the mirror and realize, am I doing the right thing? Should I find another solution? Is there something else I should do? But if you cannot think for yourself those situations, you need help. And again, you can call, you can look at your the area where you live because every place is different. So if you live, like for example, I used to live in New Jersey, but in Camden County, but in Camden City, Camden County. And when I used to live there, they have offices nearby that you can call and make appointment for counseling. So, but what type of counseling are you looking for? Are you looking for personal, family, whatever? So figure it out what type of help do you need, but make appointment as soon as you can. right? Don't wait until you're like unable to make any decisions and now you feel like you need to go to crisis, because going to crisis imply that you can no longer take care of yourself. And you need to be careful with that, because if you were a single mom and you are having a battle between yourself and your ex-spouse, or better yet, if you it's you and your spouse living together and you don't know what to do, you actually, by putting yourself in crisis center, you're actually telling the world that you can no longer be able to care for yourself, right? So now you have to figure it out why you can no longer take care of yourself. What is going on? Because that will still be the question. And when you get out, this is the thing about crisis. Okay, you go to crisis, you go to the center, you stay there for a couple days. But did you actually addressing the situation that caused you to go there in the first place? Did you? Because if you didn't, you have to understand that in 5 days, the minimum, the max could be weeks or months. When you come back, you're going to go back to that same reality that put you there in the first place. So if you haven't addressed at home what caused you to go into crisis, then you're simply going back to the same problem that you left. So it's just taking a vacation, but not truly a vacation, only just going to a crisis center where they might tell you take medicine and whatever, but they're not addressing the situation, and that's a problem. So let's just remember that as well. The other thing that I would like to discuss is that, and this is based on what the priest said, that about still doing exorcism. Why are we still calling that the person is possessed by a devil or possessed by a spirit when the person becomes extremely aggressive? But that is just a reaction of their pain, or if the person is cutting themselves, right? So why are we still cutting the idea or eliminating the possibility that the person has other issues, other what it's called underlayer issues, right? So let's just think about that. Let's just think about that as well, right? Then the last thing that I would like to address is at the point of desperation, right? Which is like, let's just say you already tried crisis and that didn't work. What did you do to? And what I notice is that if, again, it's about, the Bible speaks about the temple, the body, your body. And to me, I notice too that many times is that it's not that you haven't done it, it's that you have not taken your time to take care of yourself, to take care of your body, to take care of your mind, so then you can in turn do something that is helpful, right? That it will take you to another place, right? But I also noticed that people try crisis, crisis was crowded, that didn't work, and then the person is looking to go somewhere and to get help. Sometimes I notice too, as a caseworker, that the person don't need somebody to tell them what to do. Sometimes they just want people to hear what they have to say. So then in terms they release all that stress of like, this is what's happening. I call that vomiting, because you're saying so many things at the same time. You're not paying, you're not really listening. You're not talking. You're just like expressing all these things that are happening to you at the same time. And many times it doesn't make any sense. So let's just remember that, because when you get to that point of desperation, if you don't want to go to crisis, right? Because I just told you, crisis will try to help certain things, and it will address if you're capable of moving forward without hurting yourself. You might need medication, because if you have signs of depression, they're going to give you medicine right away. But are you still working with your problems? Are you still releasing what needs to be released? Are you dealing with the issues that took you there in the first place, right? So let's just think about that. Let's just think about those experiences as well. But if for some reason you don't want to go to crisis, right? You already tried to look all the numbers where you think you can get counseling, but they're not going to see you that same day. They're going to see you when they have an appointment available. So please still make that appointment. Still make that appointment, and keep that appointment, because you do need some kind of counseling. You do need some kind of therapy, right? So keep that appointment. But if you still need to talk to somebody, let's just say right now I want to talk to somebody. So I don't want to go to crisis. I try to make an appointment and nobody's capable of seeing me today because let's just face it, they have appointments already made. So they're not going to be able to see you. But what do you do next? So you try that, you make the appointment, but it's not suitable and you still feel this urge like you need to talk to somebody or you feel like desperate where you might hurt yourself, right? Let us remember that there are plenty rectories still available, still with priests living in there 24 hours a day where you can just walk in and talk to them. That is one thing that I still love about the priest, the Catholic priest, that you can still go to certain rectories and they will still have priests available where you can talk to, when you can get spiritual advice, when you can tell them how you feel. Because the beauty of those priests now is that you can sit down and tell them exactly what you feel, and they will give you spiritual advice. And I'm not saying that the pastors don't do it. I'm not saying that the spiritual leaders don't do it. But let's face it, a lot of them, you still have to make an appointment. So the only people that you can just walk in and still talk to them, ironically, are the Catholic priests. So my respect to them for continue a tradition that is serving the community, because they're not there waiting for you, but at the same time you have the ability to go into those places and talk to them and get that spiritual advice that you need, that you seek so badly, right? So that will be the first thing that you can do. But also make sure you have your support group, meaning get the name of people that you can call, that you know you can call at any time and tell them exactly what's going on, that you can be honest with them, that you can be transparent and express to them exactly what's going on. Because if you have friends that you can't tell them everything, that you can be transparent, that you cannot share your deepest thoughts and emotion, then they're not good friends. I don't know why you even have them. So start recognizing the people that you hang with, start realizing who's around you and why are they around you. And I'm not saying to use them every time you need counseling. No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that part of looking at yourself and make changes is also about realizing who's around you and who shouldn't be around you, who you need to let go. Because sometimes even the friends will give you the wrong advice. A good friend will give you the perfect advice, the one that you need to hear. It may not be the one you like, but it will give you the one that you need to hear. That's the friend you want to keep. The one that you can call at any time and tell them this is what's going on. And I just said, be transparent, be truthful. If you don't have that, then you don't have good friends. So please create a list of the people that you need to search for, the people that you can call your support group. These are your support people. Could be family members, it could be friends, it could be a priest. You might love that priest so much that you are willing to talk to them. So that is something that you want to look and consider. All right. So again, if you crisis center should not be your first decision as finding help. The first decision should be looking at yourself in the mirror and realize what is causing you that problem. What is it? What is it that you're doing that is coming? The Bible, I just said, calls it temptation. So what is it that it keeps coming back to you? Why? So once you realize that, then try to understand why it's coming, and why it continues to repeat itself, and why it's always triggered by that person. So it could be that you're being triggered by that person, or that you in turn trigger the person, which in turn creates tension in between the two of you. So think about that, because sometimes our own actions as parents can definitely affect our children. And because of it, we don't realize that the way they react is a way of telling me that I need to change something, that I need to address something for myself. Because at the end of the road, the way they act is a reflection of what we do and how we say things. So please remember that as a parent, that take a note of that. Go and, wait until the kids are asleep. But if for some reason you already did that and that still come and you still feel this urge of crying and it's uncontrollable, I mentioned in other videos that you need to check physically certain things. You need to check your hormones, so you need to go to the doctor, make sure it is not hormonal. But you also need to check that you're not eating certain foods that are not healthy, but also that you are eating, because if you're not eating, that also creates an imbalance and a chemical imbalance. And when you do that in combination of not sleeping, meaning that you're going to sleep thinking and overthinking things over, you're not sleeping either. So now you deprive your body from food, deprive your body from resting, right? And then if, let's just say, for example, if it's a woman and she's dealing with her menstrual cycle, now you got more hormonal problems. So then if you deprive yourself from food, from sleeping, and now you hormonal as well, guess what? That's a bomb ready to explode, meaning that your body is about to take over a different approach, which is not healthy for you. So you either become extremely aggressive, you become disoriented. If for some people it's disoriented, if you start hearing people talking and they don't make any sense and they jump from place to place to place, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but it is something that I calls it a chemical imbalance, meaning something is happening in your body is not normal. And that could be caused by drugs. Yes, I understand drugs, the use of drugs gives you that. The use of alcohol will give you that. But somebody doesn't have to be in alcohol or doesn't have to be using alcohol or using drugs for them to be disoriented. Meaning that if they deprive themselves from food and if they deprive themselves from sleeping, even not drinking a lot of water, that alone can give you that chemical imbalance. And that has nothing to do with drugs or alcohol. So it will give you that disorientation. So when you start noticing that you're doing that as well, that you're not eating, then figure it out why you're not eating, why you're not sleeping, and if it's because you're trying to lose weight, then change your eating habits. Do something better, but do not deprive your body from food, just period. Because even in the Bible, when they were doing fasting, many of the time the fasting implied not eat meat at all. It was just fresh vegetables and fruits. That's it. So that is still eating, putting something in your body. It's just a lot more healthier than not eating at all. Okay, so let's just think about that. And then the other part is that I mentioned is when you're sleeping. If you're sleeping and you can't sleep because the issues are coming in your mind, all these ideas or things that have happened in the past, well, guess what? Start thinking about what is it? Is it about a past? Is it about something that you need to do? Is it about something that if you don't do it, it's not going to come out right? Is it about practicing in your head something that you don't even know if it's going to happen? Well, guess what? Neither of those are good, because if it already happened, then guess what? You can't go back and change the past. So you have to just move forward. If it's something that you're dealing in today, well, it's still at night. So you need to tell yourself, okay, I acknowledge I need to do that, but I'll address it tomorrow. Okay, acknowledge and and tell yourself that the minimum 3 times, you know. And if it's something about a future, meaning it's not even happened yet, you don't even know if that's going to happen, why are you dwelling on something that is not possible? Because it hasn't happened yet. It hasn't happened and you're not living in the moment. So if it's not something that you need to address like right at the moment, then don't think about the future, because the future is not something that we need to be concerned about, in a sense that you don't know yet. Because you might be thinking it one way, but it might go the other way. It might go another way. So again, let's address when we go to sleep, what are we thinking? What is crossing our head? Is it something that already happened? If it happened and you notice that it's like your own self telling you should have done better, then guess what? Be honest to yourself, but be kind to yourself as well, and tell yourself unconditionally, I know I did that decision. I'm sorry that that was not the best decision. I try better tomorrow. Make sure you repeat that the minimum 3 times. Everything is about 3 or more times. Make sure you repeat that. I'm sorry. Acknowledge that you did it and that you're sorry about that. But also acknowledge that you try to do better the next day. Because this way is giving you a peace of mind. If it's something that you can do right now, pick your battles. Decide what you can do. Can you do it right now? If you cannot do it right now, then guess what? You can't fight that battle. Put it on the side, right? And if it's in the future, I just told you the future is unpredictable. You can think about something today and might not happen that way. So let's not think about that. So at night, let's just reframe ourselves. So one of the other things that I would like for people to do is that when you go to bed, make sure you do not watch TV or something. And when you go to bed, try not to keep that TV on. Try not to stay on the phone when you are about to fall asleep, because those are distractions and your brain is going to keep going and going and going, especially if you see something that you are interested. So try not to do that. Try like 2 hours before you go to bed, try to watch a comedy show, something that makes you relax, something that you already watched 20 times already, but it's there. You're not paying too much attention to it, so you can fall asleep. So you can then go to your room and fall asleep, right? So let's just think about that. But again, sometimes dwelling in the mind with a subject, that is also some way of saying a temptation, because you're creating that problem in your mind. But if you're not making a solution of that problem, then you're creating your own anxiety. You're doing anxiety, you're building anxiety on your own. Nobody's giving you that anxiety. You're doing that to yourself if you can constantly think about something, right? So remember that as well. So now that we address, like where to go, what to do, the last thing is figuring it out. As I mentioned before, what is causing you that? What is giving you that anxiety, or what is giving you that depression? I'm going to use this as a little example so we can understand. I remember facing having somebody that I knew, that the person went to rehab because the person had drug and alcohol abuse. The person went away for over a year. But the place that she went for over a year, it had it to be a place of like a Christian base. And she found the help that she needed, and she felt, and it was a female, and she felt so beautiful when she came out. Her way of speaking about God was amazing. She had this encounter back with God, and she was just lovable to sit down and listen to her. I love how she spoke about God, how God rescued her from all of that, right? But there was one problem that they addressed it with Bible situations, but they only addressed the problem with drugs and alcohol that she had. They didn't address why she went and used drugs or alcohol. And why I'm saying this? Because later she disappeared. I didn't see her again. And by the time I saw her, I couldn't even recognize her. I remember that even her aura was very dark and grayish. So I knew right away something was wrong with her. But she didn't want to look at me in my eyes. So I have to go and walk towards her and ask her, how you doing? And I couldn't ask nothing else because I knew that her aura has a darker color. And as soon as I asked, she put her head down. She didn't want to look at me. And she was just embarrassed. And I noticed that she went back to use drugs. And I just asked her, I said, I know what you did, but I want to know what happened. What was the situation that took you back to use drugs? And her response was that she was lesbian. And I'm not saying that that's a problem, but what I'm saying with this is that when they send her to a Christian place, they only address it with what the Bible says. Address the problem with alcohol or and the abuse of drugs, but they fail to make her feel comfortable in her own skin of being lesbian. They fail to teach her to love herself for who and what she was. And because of it, she still had in her mind that being a lesbian was a sin, was a sacrilege, was horrible, and God knows what other things was crossing that poor woman's mind. So the problem that I'm saying is that sometimes we become abusive to something because abusers to drugs or alcohol or anything else doesn't matter, because we haven't learned to love ourselves. We haven't learned to accept ourselves for who we are. So we first must address what was the layer, what is the underlayer of the situation. And in this case, as I use as an example, it was a woman who was lesbian that has not learned to love herself simply because she was a human. She was a beautiful person, and it has nothing to do with her sexuality. And when I'm saying that it has nothing to do with the sexuality, is because even people tend to condemn that. As a Christian, tend to condemn lesbian and homosexuality, but the reality is that we are all sinners. We are all doing something that we need to change and we need to adapt. And the part of the sexuality was more about a person who was intimate with many different people, and including men and women, and that was the problem. That is something that in later videos I will address more about sexuality, sexual energy, and why it's important to restrain ourselves from having intimacy with others. But what the Bible is telling me is that it was as a sinner of having intimacy with a woman and a woman, a man and a man, as a sin of a man and a woman. So that was still a sin. So let's not judge people for their decisions. In contrary, teach them to love themselves so much that they become not only respectful to themselves, but also that they respect themselves so much that they're not going to put themselves in that perspective anymore. They're not going to go down that level no more because they know it's not good. So I'm not teaching somebody not to be lesbian, not to be gay. That's not the point that I'm talking over here. It's almost in this a specific example that I use, it's almost to teach her to love herself for who she is. In the future, if it's about that, it's all about loving who you are, regardless what people judge you. Because when we, if as Christians, we need to stop making judgments on other people, because when we do that, we're not giving unconditional love, because unconditionally means I'm loving you exactly the way you are. And sometimes we use the Bible to judge people because the Bible said that's bad. Well, no, if God is teaching me to give love, I have to give it unconditionally. I have to give it without judgment. So going back to you in a person that needs help, please remember that that's one of the main things. You need to learn to take care of yourself, to stop loving yours. Actually not stop loving, stop judging yourself to a point that you're not taking care of yourself. So that will be the primary thing. So once you look at yourself in the mirror and you starting to realize the issues that you have and the things that you need to reinforce or change about yourself, including accepting who you are and loving yourself just for that, then you learn to understand what was your reaction towards that person or your child or your husband. What triggers that? Okay? Because as a whole, even though we're living with other people, we still need to make sure that we're not creating that. Because if we are, then again, it's going to keep coming. So we don't want it to escalate to a point where you cannot face it. So when you're dealing, please, after you check yourself, right, then the second thing will be definitely go to the doctor. Make sure it's not hormonal. Make sure it's not a chemical imbalance, nothing in the brain, anything like that. It's not a thyroid, a lower testosterone, lower estrogen, whatever that is. Just go to the doctor. Make sure there's none of that. And once you do that, if you already did those two and the problems still continue, then guess what? You need to find counseling. Instead of going to crisis, find counseling, find a therapist that is suitable for you, that is best for you, because sometimes talking to a stranger gives you the freedom to speak yourself, because the person doesn't know you. What happens after that is Also recognize what is going on in your house. If you got children with certain illnesses, like my main thing right now is autism, because a lot of parents are dealing with children that are autistic. Well, what do you do with that? Well, guess what? You also need to find help, just because the fact that you're having a child who's autistic. So now you need to find yourself help for that as well, and seek for anything that is around everything. Look for everything and anything that is around you, and make an appointment with them as well. Make sure you're getting behavioral therapists. Make sure you get early intervention if necessary. Make sure those kids are in the proper school. All of that needs to be taken care of, because this also gives you a peace of mind that you need, right, as a parent as well. So make sure that your child is in the right place, even if the child is not autistic, even if, depending on the situation that you are facing, make sure you got the right help for you and your child as well. All right, so that will be the other scenario. And then if you go to crisis center, please remember that if you did not address the situations that I mentioned before, right, you get out of the crisis center, you come back home with medicine, but you're coming back home to the exact same scenario that you faced, and you didn't want to do it. So that's one thing that you need to remember. All right, I'm not saying don't go to crisis. What I'm saying is that first address everything else that I just told you, because the possibility is that if you don't address those, when you leave the crisis center, you're going back to that. Right? So now that you mentioned that, now that you got the counseling that you need, depending, considering the situations in your house, what else do? Then I just said, create a list also of people that you can count on, people that you can address, the people that you can go and you know that you can be authentic and you can be transparent and you can show and share with them your deepest experiences, that that they're going to give you the perfect evaluation or the perfect advice. Okay, so you need to do that as well. But let's just say if you feel like you need to talk to somebody at the last minute, like let's just say you want to talk to somebody right now, please remember that the Catholic churches have rectories where priests live there, and most of the time they're 24 hours a day, and you can talk to them. That could be your spiritual guidance, because I understand that a lot of people go to these non-dimensional, like the Christians churches, where they have more like a pastor, and if that is the case, you can still go. The problem is that a lot of them will require you to have an appointment, and we don't want an appointment. We want to go today. We want to go, and right now I have seen it before, and sadly I saw the desperation of the person, and the person wanted to seek information like right now. But if that doesn't happen, then please remember your last resource is actually going to a priest. And if that doesn't work, there are places in your area, again, depending where you live, where you can just walk into agencies and hear giving counseling for families and children. So that will be another option. But again, you have to find, I know in Camden, they do have one that you can just walk in during the day. You can just walk in. But if that doesn't work, then remember the priest. Remember that. If depending, again, the church that you go, you will be able to go and find and seek that help that you need. And they'll be able to see you right and then, especially if you are a regular member of that church, a person that goes all the time, they will see you right away. But some places you might still need to make an appointment. So now that we addressed that, the last thing that I wanted to address is that clean yourself, clean your house, and remove that old energy. Find a spiritual healer that can go to your house and use some healing forks, healing bowls, any type of energy that you can use with the movement of the forks, the healing forks, which I have videos in the past about that. Make sure you use them, because that is going to remove any energy that is very low vibrational, and low vibrational energies inquire that you are depressed. It keeps you depressed. It keeps you in a very low mode, and you don't want that. So now with this new way of seeing things, you can also incorporate finding somebody who can go to your house and use healing forks and lift the vibration of your home, in which in turn it lift your own vibration. And find somebody that can do Reiki that can help you with that as well. Um, so I think I addressed pretty much all the few steps that people should do when they feel like that. And the last thing, if none of that works, I'll guarantee you that if you start from just as simple as looking at yourself in the mirror and recognizing that you need help, if you start looking yourself and you keep saying, help, I need help, I need help, I need help, I need help, that's a sign. That's a good sign. That's a sign that your own inner self is telling you loud that it's time to make a change. And when you feel that way, that's the first step. Once you feel that way, anything else will flow. But you will have to be allow those changes to come. You have to be willing to receive that change. And hopefully that is the best, biggest, and first step that you can ever make. Admitting to yourself that you need help and find the right people for that help, because not everybody can help you, but find the right people that can do and will do. The rest is all on you. The rest is just you receiving all of that and allowing all of that to flow in your body, and receiving the right information and the right help. Okay, so with that being said, I hope this video was more informative for those people that wanted to know more and how to do things a little different. And many blessings and love and life for everybody. Have a good day.